Don't be afraid to be open about things. Don't look to hide things more than not, right? There's obviously things as a leader you learn per view that behind the scenes at times that maybe a direction or sort that can't be said just yet. I'm not talking about those things, but I'm talking about transparency, clarity, right? Check in on your people, right? I think the biggest piece too is where you see with young leaders is it's very hard for them to have difficult conversations. That is one area I see every single young leader struggle with.
Welcome to the 1% Edge podcast, where we dive into the journeys of extraordinary guests committed to getting 1% better every day. And today's hot topic, from peer to boss, what new managers get wrong and how to get it right. And to help us out with that, I'm honored to have Jon Mathews, Vice President of Sales at Buxton. How you doing, Jon?
Carlos, I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for joining me today.
It's an honor. I'm not sure if I'd classify myself as a 1%er, but we strive to be every day. So,
hey, I came up with the podcast, which is all about just getting 1% better. And you know how some people have a growth mindset, and they're always learning. They're always trying to learn something from an experience. And then you got the other group. I'm good. I've been doing this long enough, which in my mind means you've peaked and now you're on a downhill slide, because the world's not going to just allow you to stay where you're at.
agreed.
So that's what it's all about. All right. Let's go back a second. So what do you mean from peer to boss? Let's describe the situation first, and then we can get into, maybe what managers might get wrong and what they get right afterwards.
Yeah. And, Carlos, I don't know if you want me to kick it off a little bit. And,
yeah.
One, just, providing some color for individuals. Obviously, when you reached out, Carlos, we were having a good chat and I loved your energy. And so again, I appreciate you having me on your podcast here. But I think one big topic to me that I'm very passionate about is obviously leadership, right? Carlos, if I were to give you an overview of my background, I'm going on 15 years of my career. It all sat in sales, right? So I have been, I think when I was 15, I was like, okay, I want to be a sales leader. I want to be a CEO.
Wow, that is different.
It's a little different, right? I wasn't thinking, hey, should I go walk on the moon here? Should I do open heart surgery? No, it was one of those things I always had a passion for. It runs in the family. I think I was very fortunate to have watched, my father and, grandfather in business, and they were leaders in the sales capacity and so forth. But I think a big, thing about my background is when I started, I carried a bag for 3.5 years, right? My first year, I was in inside sales, right? You got to do the work. You got to start from the bottom up. And then I quickly got promoted into outside sales in that first year, which was pretty fast at the time, right? And so, at that time, 3.5 years carrying a bag, vastly successful, was one of the youngest top sellers, but I always had a passion for leadership and I wanted to get into leadership. And I was very fortunate in my second company, to have done that, right? I went right off book. And so some would say, wow, Jon, that was very young at the time. And I would agree, Carlos. I think that was probably a little too young for me still at that time, right? But you see it more common in today's world, right? You're just seeing a lot of young individuals getting promoted. Not even to the first line. I'm talking about individuals too that maybe have been a first line level leader for 2 years, and then they're stepping into a second line level leader role already too. And though I am a massive fan of promoting regardless of tenure, age, if you can do the job, you put that individual in the role, right? But with that, young leadership, you do see the effects in today's world too, right? And I don't put that on them. And what I mean by that is a lot of young leaders in today's world, they're not really prepared well enough to go into the next role, right? We put a lot of emphasis on an enablement in software services, any type of company, right? It doesn't matter what type of sales. A lot of organizations say, hey, Jon, team, we need more enablement, right? We need to be training ourselves. And I think, Carlos, you would agree with that, right? But I think the problem there is we don't put emphasis on enablement for our leaders, right? It's always the IC individuals, the individuals, let's say sales, for example, right? We're on a sales podcast. It's always the IC.
Yep.
You forget about the leaders, right, Carlos? And so pretty passionate about that type of topic.
So I wrote down notes I didn't want to forget, and I agree with you. When I work with organizations, they have a whole regimen about product training, learning about the company, the product. Here's what we do. Here's where, how it works. Here's the 1,001 features, especially in tech, right? They don't do a lot of good job about on the leadership side on how you coach, develop, and build your people to create a great culture that's going to grow, expand, and scale. And especially in tech, as these companies then turn around and try to scale the business because they get, some of those early sales, things are good. They got high expectations and they stumble because they don't have the processes and the people with the right skill sets in place to expand that model. And it's kind of, I feel like it just kind of, it's like a thing that's out of balance and it wobbles out there. I mean, I've seen it even in sales training. My managers are good. Just train my reps.
Yeah, and Carlos, actually, that's funny you say that because you see that so often, right? And I think it also depends too. And I'll be fair, and I think Carlos, you would agree. It depends on the size of the organization, right? There's a big popularity with young individuals in these hyper-growth startup worlds, right? And so, versus where I was very fortunate, where I started my career, I worked for a big company at the time. I wouldn't say massive, but global presence. I mean, training in place, right? And so I was very fortunate to kind of have a little bit of structure where you see a lot more younger individuals go into hyper growth world. Why? Because it's appealing that you can move up quicker in your career. Whether you want to stay in sales and be an IC person, great, or you want to launch your career into leadership too, it doesn't matter. You have both paths, but you can do so a little bit more quickly, right? And so, but with that comes lack of structure, right? And it comes the lack of enablement, right? And typically you have CEOs that go to the C level. Hey, we got to train our people, right? Train our people. But the first thing they think about is, all right, who are the people producing for us, right? Who is making an impact in the go-to-market machine, right? And that's who we need to focus on. And naturally, we all think, well, of course, that's sellers. That's the BDRs, right? That's our marketing associate that's putting we got to train them. They got to know this stuff. But what about our leaders? And that's the biggest piece I see that's kind of still broken in today's kind of just overall sales strategy, or call it organizational strategy, honestly, Carlos.
Well, I was just doing another podcast and I made the same statement. I'll make it here. And that is a lot of times, like, for example, people roll out a program where leaders expect a certain behavior. And then I'll talk to them 3 months, 6 months after a rollout and they go, Carlos, I'm just not seeing the behavior in my reps out in the field. And I go, interesting. Can I ask you a question? Are you modeling that behavior when you are in front of the customer? What do you mean? Are you asking the questions that you're expecting your reps to ask? Are you coming in prepared, doing a little bit of research to have a little more critical thinking and a little bit more specificity to your questions? And are you demonstrating that in front of your reps? Yeah. And I will tell you 9 times out of 10, John, what I get is, Carlos, if I'm honest with you, no. I'm busy managing. I'm busy doing something else, and that's a good point. And I'm almost dumbfounded. A, because when they go through my coaching class, I told them they needed to model this, but B, to not even have the self-awareness of how can you expect others to act in a certain way if you're not even willing to act that way yourself?
Agreed. Yeah, you see that. You see that commonality, I think, a lot because it's just one of those things too. Again, it's expectations aren't being set right. But most importantly as well to the coaching and guiding. I think a problem in today's world is, companies identify great people, right? Hey, this leader fits our core values. They fit within our culture, right? They have a good background. Awesome, right? They come in and, they think these individuals are set to know their type of business, right? And then go to market, for me, my personal opinion is the machine is different for every company, right? I mean, it's your product, it's how you sell it, right? And you see all these, hey, here's the playbook to generate, 3x, 4x your pipeline and whatnot, right? I think we can all admit it's a different time now, right? But I think the one thing that we forget is our leaders represent the organization, right? Our leaders are the reason why, good people leave companies, right? And I hate to say that, yeah. And when I was a young leader, I had a good person leave on me. It was my first leadership role, my second company. And, obviously you reflect and look back because I just did leadership wrong at the time. I didn't understand, and obviously in learning, doing it for a long time now, obviously you get better at it. But the problem is, yeah, with leaders that don't really, young leaders, I should say, excuse me, that don't have direction, that don't have enablement themselves, that aren't being coached by their boss, whether that is a CRO or VP or a director or VP, whoever is managing who, right? The problem is there's a lack of enablement for our people, right?
I agree with you. And I know you made the point about, some bigger organizations versus these younger startups. But Jon, I'll be honest with you. I've seen it with multi-billion-dollar organizations. It's the majority of their workforce is millennials and Gen Zers now, and everybody's been optimized, and we don't put the training and effort behind our people like we used to, because we're trying to save a buck. And you see it in large and small organizations. Not everyone's the same, but shockingly you see it across. So let's go back to your point though a second, and that is, if you were giving advice to your younger self before you became a frontline manager, what type of advice might you or what type of gotchas or things would you share with yourself to be a better leader?
Wow. Carlos, do we have enough time for me to go down this?
We can just get started. It could be a teaser, and then people are going to want to come to the next episode, part 2.
I'm not sure we have enough time for this. I probably reflect on this question most often, still to this day. People would probably ask, Jon, why do you reflect so much on the past as the first leader? And there's reasons for that, right? I reflect the most on that piece because it's made me who I am today as a leader. Am I a perfect leader today? No, absolutely not. I tell anyone who works for me that, right? Perfection is unattainable, but seeking greatness is attainable, right? And so I think for me, I still reflect on how I can be a better leader each and every single day. But when I reflect when I was a first-time leader, right? I look at it like this. One, I was very fortunate to come from the outside in. I say that because young leaders will oftentimes get promoted within, which is awesome. I love companies who do that, by the way, Carlos, promoting within, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's an extra challenge to that. And we can let's parking lot that piece, right? Because I think that's another talking point of, how are you a young leader managing peers that you've worked with, but now are rolling underneath you, right? So visiting your first question here, I think one is self-awareness. Funny you brought that up. As I was thinking of the question, what if Carlos brings up, what would I have told myself differently? One is self-awareness. You need to understand your strengths, your weaknesses, and your emotional triggers. Sounds weird, right? However, you're going to have more weaknesses as a young leader than you will strengths. Why? You're a first-time leader. This is your first time actually dealing with people who put trust in your hands to lead them to success, right? This is the first time you have to make tough decisions. This is the first time that you have individuals rolling underneath you, right? And you're responsible for their revenue, right? And making sure they produce and so forth, right? So I think for me is understand that you're going to have a lot more weaknesses than you will strengths. That's okay. Embrace that. That is how you grow. You, Carlos, you also coined my favorite term as a growth mindset. Anyone who works for me is listening to this, they're probably smiling because, yeah, Jon's always saying something about the growth mindset, right? I'm a big fan of that piece. And that leads me into number 2. Having a growth mindset. When I was a first-time leader, Carlos, in my second company, I did not have a growth mindset. Truthfully, I thought Jon was on a red-hot track. This is my opportunity to shine. And though we were very successful at my second company and what we did there, I still reflect to say I just had the wrong mindset. I didn't intake, feedback well. I didn't listen to individuals who worked for me. right? And that's an important piece I will most likely revisit here in a bit. But it's having a growth mindset and it's taking everything in, right? I think that's the biggest piece, which kind of goes with coachability, right? You have to be open to feedback, and you have to be willing to evolve, right? That is so critical. The best young leaders are hungry to learn. They're not afraid to be wrong. We are so afraid to be wrong in today's world, where it's the end all be all. And that's a problem with a young leader. They don't want to get things wrong. They're trying to build up their reputation, right? This is their first leadership role. However, what they don't understand is being wrong is okay. Admitting you are wrong is okay. In fact, it builds trust stronger with your teams, right? I think a few other quick areas, Carlos, is just clarity of communication. There needs to be communication, needs to be clear, needs to be frequent, it needs to be with intent, right? Don't be afraid to tell your team things. You know what I mean? Don't be afraid to be open about things. Don't look to hide things more than not, right? There's obviously things as a leader you learn per view that behind the scenes at times that maybe a direction or so forth that can't be said just yet. I'm not talking about those things, but I'm talking about transparency, clarity, right? Check in on your people, right? I think the biggest piece too is where you see with young leaders is it's very hard for them to have difficult conversations. That is one area I see every single young leader struggle with. Jon, I don't like, this person, they're great, man, they run down walls from you. It's just not clicking, right? I just kind of struggle to be very clear about, hey, we got to turn this ship around. Otherwise, we may have to go into a different direction. To me, what I tell young leaders there, Carlos, is don't be afraid to be transparent. In fact, if you really do care for your people and your team, transparency is actually easier than you think. Having tough conversations is easier than you think, right? Again, having a mindset of saying, you know what, this is best for this person because they could potentially turn this around if I, let them know where they're at from my viewpoint, right? And how they've been performing. That's okay. But I think a lot of times individuals, they kind of get this random call, hey, we're letting you go due to performance. And, these individuals are going, wait a minute, you haven't really talked to me about performance. I mean, I know I'm not performing, but where was our conversations?
Right.
Report, right? You don't see that as much. And so I wish, and funny, if people knew me, they'd say, wait, Jon had problems with tough conversations with people. I did still, though. That was something I had to learn and grow into. And every young leader that would say different, it's a false lie. It's very difficult because we all have a heart, even leaders do, right? They care for their things. I think the biggest and last piece, Carlos, as I'll wrap up this question, is culture is everything. As a leader, you are responsible for defining the culture. Your actions speak for how your team actions produce, right? Don't force something on your team that you're not willing to do yourself, right? A leader isn't this sexy title empowerment, right? A leader, that's not what a leader is about. It's about being able to be in there with your team, especially a first line level leader, right? If you're a first line level leader, your job is to be in the trenches with your team. You shouldn't be doing the job for them. Obviously, coaching, training, right? Enablement, we're talking about that, but your job is to be in the trenches with them. This second level leader's job, and this also does vary on company sizes and organizations, is set the strategy, right? Set the direction and so forth. But culture is everything. I see a lot of young leaders say, Jon, I have a top producer, but man, they are a virus. They
right.
don't
Cancer.
Yeah, they don't follow process. They're so negative all the time. And I said, well, what's been your expectations to them? Well, what do you mean? Well, what I mean, have you set expectations with them, right? Hey, Carlos, look, I know you're our top, producer here today. I love it. I want you to continue being our top producer, right? But hey, here's just some of my expectations I need you to do, right? And you got to set those expectations. It doesn't matter if they're a top producer or not. I think that's one thing a lot of leaders struggle with as well too, and it will put you in a hole. Culture is everything. You cannot have blurred lines with your top producers, but then hold everyone else to this tightrope standard. If you kind of curtail, I would say if you kind of curtail your, hey, Carlos, that's okay. You didn't do this. I got you. Don't worry. But then you hold someone else to that same standard. You are not building a culture that will pay off well for you in the end, right? You step over that one line, everyone's going to expect you to step over that line with them as well, too. So wrap it up, Carlos. I think those are some of the, I have more, trust me, but I think those are some of the more important things I reflect and look back and say.
We unpacked a lot there, and I was trying to write some of them down and take some notes to try to remember to kind of go back to them. So, for example, on the last one about culture being everything, and I forget who says that line, culture eats strategy for lunch.
Yeah, heard it. Love it.
It's someone else said it. I just can't remember who. Along those same lines, you brought something up. I think when you have a top rep who's performing well against their number, but not performing well as far as their behaviors, you got a problem. And some leaders, for example, I've literally gotten this line, Carlos, the sales training and stuff, it's really for these guys. But John's doing great. Don't mess with him. Don't worry about him. And I go, look, I'm going to give you the two most important people to convince if you want to drive a change in behavior. First, it's you as a leader. Because if you're not bought in, they're not bought in. And two, it's that top performer. Because he is the top performer, people want to know, well, how do you do it? And they want to model those behaviors because they're seeing it be successful. And if you can't get your top performer to be on the same page with you, you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Agreed.
And some leaders, even senior leaders, miss that. And I'll go back to something else you said. It's that whole transition from being a rep, a really good rep, to being a leader. And I was thinking about this, and I don't know if I'm using the right words, but at first, when you're a rep, you worry about my number. I got to hit my number. I got to achieve my goal. I'm judged on my number. You become a leader, and sometimes now you take the bigger number, but you kept the same mindset. My number, my thing, my. Versus, no, dude, you lost the. Now it's their number.
Yes.
And their success is your success. If they're not successful, you're not successful. Some leaders never get that.
I would 100% agree with you. I have seen it still in my times where, even as senior level leader, we'll let a kind of bad apple go because the individual is producing, right? But in the end, again, all you're doing is you're creating a toxicity that will one day spiral, and it will return, and not in a good way, right? Yeah.
Affecting that culture you talked about.
Agreed.
And as all these companies, especially in tech, try to scale and grow, you forget that the culture and process and what you inspect and expect really multiply as you get bigger. So like sometimes I'll talk to smaller organizations. Hey, Carlos, I want to do this whole sales training program, value-based, but hey, I'm small right now. Let's talk next year when I'm bigger. Like, that's fine. I like bigger accounts. However, if you don't start implementing the right behaviors now while you're small and manageable, good luck doing it a year from now when you're twice as big.
Yes.
It's kind of like a bad golf swing. You get some bad habits. Good luck changing them down the road. It gets harder and harder.
Carlos, I thought you were talking about my golf swing there.
No, I'm a horrible golfer. I've given it up for fishing. I'm going to re-pick it up when I retire. That's my line.
But you're right, though. You see that quite often, too, right? And it's just one of those things where, again, I mean, obviously, it also depends as a leader, how are you stepping into this organization? Again, is this an internal promotion track? Great. Are you stepping in from the outside as a leader? Right. And I think there's obviously a lot of variables that you can step into, right? I've done it all, right? I've been internal promoted, overseeing peers, right? I've come in from the outside, and so forth. And so each path has its differences, and, how you create the buy-in and as a young leader too, right? But there's just things you have to do and understand. But most of all, I think what a lot of individuals forget is in time, you become a stronger leader, right? But you need to give it time to see different situations, to see different scenarios, right? Doing this for 15 years now, I've been managing for 13 of those years. And I am now feeling like, Carlos, I'm stepping into my prime as a leader. I'm not going to say I'm the quickest learner in the book, right? But when you're also young in your 20s and you didn't have a growth mindset, you kind of prohibit yourself from growing even faster and stronger, right? And so obviously a lot of learning lessons for me in my past, but the biggest one for me is having a growth mindset. Be open to feedback, be open to mentorship, be open to your team's feedback as well too, right? Because at times they're rooting for you, especially if you're a good person, but oftentimes they have some valid feedback for you too.
Okay, good news, bad news. The skill sets are going to serve you great throughout your career. That's the good news. The bad news, you're going to get promoted to the next position. You're going to go to the next company. You're going to go to a bigger company, and it all takes different skill sets. Mm-hmm. So whether it's 15 years, 25 years, or 35 years, that growth mindset I know you care about, you hold on to that, because that's what serves you well throughout this. Because things are constantly changing, even outside of your control, right? The economy, the world, AI coming in the workplace. How do you continue to be willing to take these things on, give them a real honest look, and see how you can leverage it to the best of your ability and your team's ability?
Yeah, and honestly, Carlos, you just mentioned some great things. I think one thing we forgot about, the most important piece, was the evolution of people, right? I'm going to park and lot that, for a second, but to go back is, I think young leaders have an advantage though. And again, that's why they're appealing to some companies of, hey, they understand this new AI wave coming out, especially in the sales world, right? They have the pulse on these younger individuals that seem to be our hiring persona that we like to bring in, right? And so I think there is a lot of advantages to that, and especially from an organization that wants to grow quickly, right? They think, oh, great, this is a plug and play. This person was a great seller. Let's put them in here and then just have them train everyone else, and we're gonna have a great an elite sales team here, right? But obviously they forget to train the leader themselves, right? But people have been the biggest evolution, I think, over just the last even 5-10 years, right? When I first started my career, it is very different of an environment we are in than it is now, right? And I think that's another area where, and at no fault of them, young leaders struggle in too, right? It's just different time, different people. Things mean different for individuals. People love a little bit more work-life balance, and we have to be accommodating to that, right? We have to accept it. And so I think the biggest one is the evolution that has happened over the years, and just how environments have switched. And obviously, I can understand that piece too.
Well, Jon, I could talk to you forever, but I'm trying to keep these things to 30 minutes. So I know I'm leaving a whole bunch of questions and stuff on the table, but hey, maybe you need to come back and we can talk about part 2 of becoming a better leader. But what I want to do is, Jon, tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your own background.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I think, as I mentioned earlier, going on, this is my 15th year in my career. I have an undergrad in business management and a graduate degree in management and organizational behavior. I started out my career, as I mentioned, sales was always my focus. I alluded to this earlier. When I was 15, I was like, okay, my path as a sales leader, I want to be a CEO of a company. The CEO part might have changed a little bit, but I definitely shooting for the CRO path one day, right? I'm in no rush for it, but I know it will come soon. But with that, I started out in inside sales and quickly moved my way into outside sales, and again was vastly successful in my first career. And then after that, stepped into technology, was in the services piece a little bit, and then was an off-book leader at the same time too. And after being with my second company for 3 years and doing some amazing organic growth, I got into a point where I moved around to a few different companies, overseeing from first line, second line level leadership, SMB, mid-market, enterprise, a variety of verticals, right? You name it, I think I've done it, right? Carlos, I'm not one of those specialized leaders, I would say, in one arena or another. But what I love about my background and what I've accumulated is I have shown that, whether you're a seller or a sales leader, sales is a skill set that is transferable anywhere. Truly is. You don't have to have an industry background to go work for the dream company that you want, right? I think at the end of the day, you just have to understand sales and what that's about, and then obviously do the work at your new company to understand that piece for me. And I think that's what I've done and shown in my time. I truly have a passion for leadership. It's why I have done it longer than I've carried a book in sales, even though I do get asked at times, John, do you miss the itch at all? And maybe years back I did, but I'm still very much in the trenches too. Even as a second line level leader, right? I still like to be on calls. I still like to keep that skill set, because that's one thing I've always promised myself was, as I move up in my career, I don't want to forget where I came from and where I started. And obviously an important integral piece to every company are sellers, right? Great sellers. So that's a skill set that I always want to maintain and have, even trying to go the CRO direction.
It's funny you say that, because I had an opportunity to go work for a large tech company, but when I asked folks about this VP role, the person they thought was doing a great job out of it was very internally focused. And I said, but I'm an externally focused guy. I'm a guy in your trenches, still doing deal strategy, trying to figure out how we all win, not, hey, how do I politically position myself or with whatever internally? That's not, my strength. And if that's what you're looking for, I'm not that guy. And it takes some maturity on my part to be able to come to that realization, because the allure of a VP and a big tech company was really appealing to me at the time. But it's got to be the right role too, where you could survive, because I've stayed at the wrong role way too long sometimes, and I can see how miserable it can make you. And I'm stubborn, so I think, well, I got to succeed no matter what. But sometimes you go, you know what, I'm in the wrong spot, right? And I got to make a pivot. So, all right, two last questions. Last one is, what's your 1% edge? What have you been working on that's making you 1% better these days?
Look, full transparency, Carlos, I am working on a multitude of things. Within everyone's career, there's always a life outside of a career. And I think it's important to always talk about those two aspects of, what am I working on in my career? What am I working on outside of my career? Because at the end of the day, the two are entangled, right? The two are a part of each other. So a little vulnerability here, I think, because I'll finish with the career last. On the personal note, I think just being a better husband. And, obviously still, I got married last December, so still learning.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. So still, I'm very much outside of work focusing on that piece. I think that's my number one focus right now, and trying to be a great husband and, potentially future father. Well, TBD, right? We're getting up there on the age side, but on the career side, in all seriousness, I'm working on a multitude of things. Right now in my career, I think timing and experience has really caught up to me, and leadership has been a lot of fun, because now you see things coming. Oh, I've seen this playbook before. Okay, let's pivot here. Oh, I've seen this conversation before. Here's how this is going to go down, right? I'm ready for this. So I tell young leaders real quick that through time and being a leader, it is a lot of fun. Don't be afraid to make the mistakes early on, right? And so for me, I'm working on the people side of things still, and not by people side of empathy or communication. I think my team would say, hey, John has great strengths in that, right? Being there for his team, understanding, right? But what I mean by that is I'm going back to that evolution of people, right? And people just being different. And so understanding the society we're in today and balancing that with my mindset of, yes, we're in a new society of how we manage people and how we build cultures, right? Versus, still having that grit and determination I had when I started my career. And so I think, that's one piece right now that I continue to focus on. I wake up each and every single day. I know, Carlos, you're going to say this is corny. A lot of individuals who are listening to this are going to be like, gosh, what a corny response. But I wake up every morning and I ask myself, what's one thing I can do today to be a better leader than I was yesterday? And that still hangs true to me to this day.
Love it. It's not corny at all. All right, John, if people want to get to know you better, reach out to you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah. LinkedIn is probably the best. Carlos, feel free, Jon Mathews, and love to connect. If I'm not one of those individuals that will, if you want to talk about, being a young leader right now, I'm not going to send you my Venmo. Just have a conversation. One thing I've also promised to myself and my career was giving back to the younger generation. And so whatever I can do to help with conversations or mentor people, very much open to that. And so, Carlos, I know we're running up on time. I leave you with this. So for any young leader, leadership is, it is not a title. It is not empowerment. It is not overseeing people. It is a skill, right? It is learn. It is practice. It is sharpened through reps and reflection. And so I leave everyone with that piece.
I love it. All right. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Jon. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I could talk to you for another hour.
I could too, Carlos. I had a lot of fun with you, buddy. I'm honored to be on here with you. Guys, Carlos is a great individual. Follow his other podcasts that he does, and I know you'll enjoy them.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, everyone. That does it for this week's episode. If you got some value from my conversation with Jon, please subscribe, write some comments, give me some notes. And until next time, I wish you nothing but the greatest success.